We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Hey Amud Beis in Meseches Gitin. This is Gittin Daf 75b. The Gemara is in the middle of continuing a brisa. The brisa says that, let's say the husband says to his wife, "This is your get on the condition that you return the parchment to me." That's going to be an effective gerushin. And the Gemara had understood initially that the brisa means to say that the husband is saying to the wife, when you actually return the get to me, at that point in time, that's when the gerushin will take place. And so the Gemara asked, how could the gerushin take place at that point in time? Why is it a good gerushin? She's not in possession at that moment of the get. She's returning the get. That is the condition. But at that point in time, it's already too late for the gerushin to be chal. She no longer has the get. And so the Gemara is trying a number of approaches to say that what the brisa was actually saying is that the condition itself wasn't good at all, because the condition wasn't formulated in the fashion of the condition of the Bnei Gittin and Bnei Ruvain in the Torah. And that's what the Gemara is now in the middle of Rav Ada bar Ava's approach, why it's not considered a good condition. Again, the Tanayu Maisa b'davar echad, because over here it's different, because the condition and the action are actually the same thing. As Rashi says, b'davar echad beget atzmo hu hatanai lachziro v'hu ha'maisa lios get. In terms of the get itself, meaning the condition is to return the get, and the action is that it's going to be a good get, it's going to be a good gerushin, and that's not like the Tanai Bnei Gad Bnei Ruvain. So that should be the reason Rav Ada bar Av is arguing. He's arguing against the previous suggestion of one of the Amoraim. That should be the reason why it's not good, and that's what he says. Elamar Rav Ada bar Ava, rather Rav Ada bar Ava says the reason why the condition is not good and therefore the gerushin is good is mishum de Tanayu Maisa b'davar echad, because the condition and the action, again, the condition of returning the parchment and the action of it being a good gerushin is all involving the same thing. It's all involving the actual get, the actual document, the get itself, and that's why, again, the condition is not good and the gerushin would be good. But the Gemara continues with another approach altogether. Rav Ashi says, why is it in this case of the brisa where he says, on the condition that you return the parchment, why do we say that it's a good gerushin? Hamani Rebbe. The reason is, who's the author of this brisa? It's Rebbe. The Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rebbe, because Rav Huna said that Rebbe said, Kol ha'omer almanas ka'omer me'achshav dami. Anybody who says the words almanas, over here the husband said, Hareza gitech almanas. This is your get on the condition that you return to me the parchment. That's like saying me'achshav, meaning it's really retroactive. At the point in time that she returns the parchment, that's the fulfillment of the condition, and then retroactively going back to the point in time where he gave her the get, it's at that point in time that it's a divorce, and of course, at that point in time she did have possession of the get, so it would be an effective gerushin. Rashi says, Rebbe hi da'amar ka'omer me'achshav dami, v'shtakach dev'shas gerushin nikita leget. It turns out at the time of the divorce, she was holding the get, ulachar zman hi machzeres. It's just later on that she's returning the parchment. If a person gives a gift on the condition that it later be returned, that's still called a matana, and therefore that's still considered a nesina saget, and that's why it's a good gerushin. And the point over here is this final approach of Rav Ashi is saying, unlike all the previous approaches where the Amoraim were trying to find reasons why the condition is not a condition at all, because it's not formulated like the condition of Bnei Gad or Bnei Ruvain, and they gave various reasons. Let's say it's not a Tanai Kafel, or let's say in this situation the Maisa is before the Tanai, instead of the Tanai being before the Maisa, or the suggestion that we just had of Rav Ada bar Ava, that in this case the Tanai and the Maisa are b'davar echad, and you're not allowed to have that. That's not like the conditions of the Bnei Gad or Bnei Ruvain. All those Amoraim were trying to find reasons why the condition is not good at all, and therefore it's a good gerushin. Rav Ashi is saying, no, the condition is effective, but the condition is retroactive. Almanas is ka'omer me'achshav. It's the same thing as me'achshav, and therefore, since the condition is retroactive, that's why the gerushin is a good gerushin. And the Gemara continues, asking Shmuel begita the shchiv meira. Shmuel made the following takana when it comes to a get that is given by a shchiv meira, by a husband who's on his deathbed. The formulation of the Tanai should be as follows: Im lo mati lo yehe get. If I don't die, then it's not going to be a get. Ve'im mati yehe get. And if I die, then it should be a get. And Rashi explains, asking Shmuel k'shemos rola, meaning when he gives her the get, Yomar, he has to formulate the condition as follows: Im lo mati lo yehe get. If I don't die, then it's not a get. And im mati yehe get. And if I die, it is a get. The point is to ba'inon Tanai Kafel. You need to have a Tanai Kafel. The point of Shmuel's Takan is you have to follow the formulation of the condition of the Bnei Gad and the Bnei Ruvain. It has to be a Tanai Kafel. That's why you have to formulate, if I don't die, it's not a get. If I do die, it is a get. The ilo kafle, because if he doesn't say the condition in this manner, he doesn't use the double language, have a gita miyad, the Tanai won't be good, it will be a get immediately. V'i kohen hu mifsal, and then if he's a kohen, it shall become puzzle to him, because he made no condition over here. Even if he gets better, it's going to be a problem, because the get will be chal, and so that's why Shmuel said he should specifically use the formulation using a Tanai kafel. And the Gemara continues, V'leima im mati yeheget, v'im lo mati lo yeheget. Why doesn't he formulate it in the other direction? Why doesn't he say, if I die, it is a get, and if I I don't die, then it's not a get. Why does he say instead, if I don't die, it's not a get first, and then if I die, it should be a get? And to that the Gemara says, Lo mak diminish per anusal nafshi. A person's not going to say first the punishment to himself. He shouldn't start off the condition by saying, if I die, that's already something that's bad. It's better to start off, if I don't die. But the Gemara continues, V'leima lo yehe get im lo mati. Why not say it in the other direction? Why not say it's not a get if I don't die, instead of saying if I don't die, it's not a get? And to that the Gemara says, as it said earlier, Ba'inon tanai kodem l'maisa. The condition part always has to come before the action part. That's why he has to say im lo mati first. That's the condition, and then he says lo yehe get. It's not going to be a get. But the Gemara continues, Maskif lo Rava. Rava asks the following question: Michti, let us see. Kol tanai mehecha gamrinan. Again, where do we learn our conditions from? Mitanai b'nei Gad b'nei Ruven, from the condition of the b'nei Gad and the b'nei Ruven. Ma'hasam hein kodem lalav. Just like over there, the yes part of the statement was before the no, meaning the positive was before the negative. Afkol, so to an all tanai that's how it has to be. Lafuke hachad lav kodem lahen. That would exclude this case where the person is saying, if I don't die, it's not a get. He's saying the negative first, so that shouldn't be good. As Rashi says, hein kodem, the positive is first, meaning in the case of b'nei Gad and b'nei Ruven, im yavru unesatan. They said if they cross over, if they go over and help fight the war, so then they're going to receive the inheritance. So you see the positive is first, and so the same thing should have to be true by all tanoim, by all conditions. And so the Gemara says, Elam Rava, rather Rava says, im lo mati lo yehe get. You start off with im lo mati lo yehe get. Now, even though that's a negative, you should start off with that, because you shouldn't start off with puranus, you shouldn't start off with punishment. And then he should say im mati yehe get. He should say, if I die, it is a get. That's the positive. And then he should repeat im lo mati lo yehe get. If I don't die, then it's not a get. That way he has the positive before the negative. And that's how the Gemara explains it. Im lo mati lo yehe get. He first says im lo mati lo yehe get, lo makdim inish por anusal nafshe, because a person shouldn't say the punishment first. And im mati yehe get, im lo mati lo yehe get. Then he says, if I die, it should be a get. If I don't die, it's not a get, because ba'inon hein kodem lalav. You need the yes to come before the no. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hareza Gitech al Menashe Teshamshi Asab. But let's say the husband says to his wife, this is your get on the condition that you serve my father. Al Menashe Tenikias Benir, on the condition that you nurse my son. Kamahi Menikasa. So for how long does she have to nurse the son? Shtei Shanim, it's for 2 years. Rabbi Yehuda says Shmona Asar Chodesh, it's for 18 months. Meisa ben o shemeisa av. Let's say the son dies, or let's say the father dies. Hareza get, it's still going to be a good get. Hareza gitach amanasha teshamshi abba shtei shanim. Amanasha teniki b'ni shtei shanim. Now let's say the condition is, this is your get on the condition that you serve my father for 2 years. There's a specific time period. Or on the condition that you nurse my son for 2 years. In that case, meis haben o she'amar ha'avi efshishet teshamsheni. If the son dies, or the father says, I don't want you to serve me, shelo b'hakpad, he doesn't even say this out of anger. Eino get, it's not going to be an effective get, because at the end of the day, she has not fulfilled the condition of serving the father or nursing the son for 2 years. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, because that get, that is considered to be a get in this case. In this case, it's not her fault that she wasn't able to fulfill the condition. Klal Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel has the following rule: Kol hakova she'eina heimena, any kind of hindrance that's not from her, it's not her fault. Harei ze get, that's still considered to be a get. It is considered to be a fulfillment of the condition. Rashi says, Kamahi minikaso beis shanim, in the first case of the Mishnah. So it said again, if it's on condition that you nurse my son, so for how long does she have to nurse? For 2 years. Sheyehei levlad shtei shanim shekach uzman henikahanakaso. That's the general amount that you nurse. That's for 2 years. Uleinyan l'shamish es aviv kol yimei chayev. Now, in the case of, on the condition that you serve my father, how long does she have to serve the father? That's all the days that he's alive. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shmona asar chodesh. Rabbi Yehuda says it's 18 months. Rabbi Yehuda's man hanokas tinok ad shehu lo yudches chodashim miksubas. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says in Ksubas, the amount of time a person nurses the child is nursed for 18 months. Meis haben kodem hazman o meis ha'av. Let's say the son dies before the amount of time, before the 2 years, or let's say the father dies, hareze get. So the Mishnah said that's still considered a good get. Tekevan de lo parish midi, because there was no explanation here how long. Lo achaven el harvacha kol yomim shutzarech. The whole idea is as long as the amount of time that's necessary. Umekan ve'elach eino tzarech. If the person died, so then it's not necessary anymore, so that's no problem. That's still considered a fulfillment of the condition. And then it said a case, let's say again, the father says, in the case where he says that you should serve my father for 2 years, I don't want you to serve me, the father says, and it's shelo b'hakpada, he says this with no anger. Shelo b'hakpada hilo hechisasa. The point is, she didn't make the father angry, he just doesn't want to be served. The point is, even though it's not her fault, he just doesn't want to be served. The Tana Kama says, ain't no get, it's not considered to be a good get. The kol shekein b'hakpada. Now, obviously, if it's her fault that the father doesn't want her to serve him because she made him angry, so then obviously it's her fault. That's not a fulfillment of the condition. That's not going to be a get. But Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer kaza get. Again, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnah says that is a get in a situation where it's not her fault. So the fact that the condition wasn't technically fulfilled, it's still considered fulfilled. Since she didn't make him angry, it wasn't because of her that there was a hindrance to the fulfillment of the condition. So that's considered to be a fulfillment of the condition. And the Gemara says, Umi bo inon kuli hai. Is it really true that we need to have, that has to be for 2 years? Let's say the person says, Al menashe tenikias b'ni, on the condition that you nurse my son. So is it really true that she has to do it for 2 years? That's the condition. Uramini, but we have the following contradiction. It says in the Braisa, Shimshasa yom echad, and ikasa yom echad, if she just serves the father for 1 day, if she just nurses for 1 day, harei ze get. That's considered to be a get, apparently, when the condition is made. So we say that it just has to be done for 1 day. That's considered to be a fulfillment of the condition. And the Gemara continues, Amar of Chisda says, Lo kash, it's not difficult, this contradiction between our Mishnah and the Braisa is from the Tosefta, this contradiction is not difficult. Ha-Rabbanan v'ha-Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. In one case we're talking according to the Rabbanan, in one case we're talking according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel as follows, Masnis and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, our Mishnah is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, that's referring to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel who says, let's say the husband makes the condition, you have to return my coats. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says if she doesn't have the coat, she can return the value of the coat. But the point over here is that it has to be the full value. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel over here would also say it has to be the full value in terms of the nursing, in terms of the serving of the father. Ubraisa Rabbanan, and the Braisa follows the Rabbanan. It doesn't have to be a full value, and therefore it's just a hakpada that you do what the condition said. The condition said that you have to nurse. The condition said you have to serve. 1 day is going to be sufficient. According to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, that's not sufficient. 1 day is not sufficient because the point isn't just the action, it's also the value that was set on the condition. As Rashi explains, Masnisan Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Damar Leil Titin Domeha, he says that she could just give the value of the coat. Almal Harvach Mechavi. You see, the point of conditions are, it's not so much the action, but it's what the value of those actions are. V'lav Dafka Kamar, it doesn't mean so, you don't have to be so specific to a coat, you don't have to be so specific to 1 day of nursing. Hanami Harvach Echavin V'chozman Shutzarach Liane Kamar, he means the amount of time the child needs to nurse, that's how long it should be done for, and therefore it has to be done for 2 years. And again, that's according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, that we're following the general value, not the literal statement of the condition. And so that's the answer of Rav Chisda, that our Mishnah follows Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and that's why we're strict to require 2 years or for the entire life of the father. But the Gemara asks, Hamid say for Rav Shimon ben Gamliel have it, but from the fact that at the end of the Mishnah we bring the sheet of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Mechlal Dereishal Lav Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, doesn't that imply that the beginning of the Mishnah is not following the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel? So how could Rav Chisda say that our Mishnah follows Rav Shimon ben Gamliel? And so the Gemara instead says the reverse. Ella rather, Braisa Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. It's the other way around. Braisa Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. The Braisa actually is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, the Mekel B'Tanai, who in general is lenient when it comes to conditions. In other words, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says when she doesn't have the coat, she can give the value. That shows a general leniency in terms of the fulfillment of conditions according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. And here also in the Braisa, there's a general leniency. She only has to nurse. She only has to serve the father for 1 day. Masnis and Rabbanan, and our Mishnah follows the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan are stricter, she has to return the actual coat, and so to over here, the Rabbanan are stricter, she has to nurse for 2 years, or she has to serve the father, calls man the entire time that he's alive. And the Gemara gives another approach to answering the contradiction between our Mishnah and the Braisa. Rava Amar, Rava says, Lokash, it's not difficult. Kan b'stam, kan b'mefarish. In our Mishnah, it's stam. That's what it sounds like our Mishnah is saying. The condition simply is nurse the child. The condition simply is serve the father. And therefore it has to be for a period of 2 years or for a period while the father is alive. And the Braisa is talking about a situation of mefarish, meaning to say the Braisa is talking about a case where it was actually explained that you only have to do it for 1 day. But the Gemara continues, Rav Ashi Yamar, Rav Ashi says, Kol stam nami k'mefarish yom echadami. It's not true. Anytime you have a situation where it said stam, if there's no time period that is set, that's the same thing as 1 day, and it would only have to be done for 1 day. And Rashi says, Kan Bistam, again the answer of Rava, Masnisin Damar Shtei Shanim Taniki Bistam. Again, our Mishnah is talking about where there was no time period. That's why it has to be for 2 years. Ubraisa B'mefarish Yom Echad. The Braisa is talking about where explicitly the condition was said that it was 1 day, so it only has to be done for 1 day. And then the Gemara said that Rav Ashi says, Braisa Bistam. No, the Braisa is talking about a Stam situation. If you don't say anything, it just has to be 1 day. Now, in terms of our Mishnah, how does he understand our Mishnah? Why does it have to be 2 years? That Rav Ashi will explain further on. For Rav Ashi, lav l'shanuye masnisin ubraisa also. Right now, Rav Ashi is not trying to answer the contradiction between the Mishnah and the Braisa. The point is, he's just arguing on Rava. Diamar stam shtei shanim, because Rava said that if it's stam, if there's no time period, it has to be for 2 years. And Rav Ashi says that's not true. In the case of stam, it's just for 1 day. And the Gemara now asks on Rav Ashi. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, how long does she nurse him for? 2 years. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shmona Asar Chodesh. Rabbi Yehuda says 18 months. So Bishlamala Rava Nicha, I understand according to Rava, it makes sense. There was no time period, so therefore she has to do it for 2 years or 18 months. Elul Rav Ashi, but according to Rav Ashi, who says that if no time period was said, it's just 1 day. Lama lishtei shanim, lama lishmona asar chodesh, biyom echad sagi. Why does she need to do it for 2 years or 18 months? 1 day should be sufficient. And the Gemara answers to that, Hachi Kamer. This is how Rav Ashi will understand our Mishnah. Yom echad mishtei shanim. What the Mishnah just means is, it really only has to be done for 1 day, but it has to be done for 1 day within the first 2 years of the child's life. That's considered to be a fulfillment of the condition. La'afuke la'achar shtei shanim delo. That would exclude if the nursing takes place in 1 day, but after the 2 years of the child's life, that would not be a fulfillment of the condition. And similarly, Yom echad mishmona asar chodesh, according to the other opinion, the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, it has to be 1 day from the first 18 months of the child's life. To exclude if it happens after 18 months, if let's say it's 1 day after the 18 months of the child's life, that would not be a fulfillment of the condition. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the end of the Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah said, this is your get on condition that you serve father for 2 years, and the condition you nurse my son for 2 years. In the Sefer of the Mishnah, again, it was specified in the condition the time period of 2 years. So it said at the end of the Mishnah, if the son dies, or if the father says, I don't want you to serve me, and he's not saying that out of anger. So we said again, according to the Tanakama, Eino get, that would not be considered a good get, because you don't have a fulfillment of the condition. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph.